So I want to start with this idea of affordances of the environment. The textbook talks about this concept as meaning what the environment offers the animal. So this comes from a longer quote, the quote that's in the textbook. I'll read you the longer quote from the original article, which was published in 1979. The affordances of the environment are what it offers the animal, what it provides or furnishes, either for good or ill. The verb to afford is found in the dictionary. The noun affordance is not. I have made it up. So by I, that means Jerome Gibson, or James Jerome Gibson. I mean by it something that refers to both the environment and the animal in a way that no existing term does. It implies the complementarity of the animal and the environment. So what does this have to do with communication? Well, we are always communicating in a multiplicity of ways. It's not just the words that we're saying. It's not even just, the visual communication, the photographs or the films that we might be looking at or watching. We're communicating in a multiplicity of ways all the time, every day, and we take in this information that we see, that we hear, that we taste, that we smell, that we experience, and we process this information, and then we see the world through the culmination or the accumulation of all this evidence that we've gathered. So when I was growing up, whale shows were a thing, and it was pretty cool. You got as close as you could to the front because you knew that you were going to get splashed by the water, and that was neat. Um, I don't ever remember really even thinking about the whales and what they must have felt like being in that situation in a small enclosed area, and perhaps not wanting to be there, or not being healthy as a result of being stuck in this small enclosed space and being made to entertain an audience most days of their lives. But these are the kinds of images that we take in, and over time, when you see an animal repeatedly within the context of its serving humans for our entertainment, of course, we start to think of animals as a source of entertainment rather than perhaps something that's beneficial in other ways, beneficial to the ecosystem, or perhaps having value just of its own, rather than in how we interact with it. So this accumulation of taking in these images, these experiences, really reflects on how we ultimately view other species. It also reflects upon how we internalize other environments as well. How do we see the environments that we either inhabit or that we visit? Do we see them as things that we should consume, or do we see them as having value of their own? So these communication messages matter. And so I would ask you to think about this image and the connotations of this image. So what kinds of implications or associations do you make with this particular image as opposed to, say, an image like this? What assumptions, what kinds of things do you start to associate whales with if this was, say, the only time you saw them, or this was the only context you saw them in, or if this was a context that you saw them in and this was significant for you, and maybe you never actually ever saw them in their natural habitat. So what does the environment in which we contextualize another species afford that species. We can look at this in another way. We can think of this, we can expand this idea, this analogy, and think about the context of the way we see various species or various landscapes or various environments. If over time we see something contextualized a certain way, then we make these associations. So if most people don't very often see or hear wolves in the wild. I'm fortunate enough that I have on numerous occasions, but most people, I think it's pretty safe to say that the majority of people probably aren't privileged in that way. So perhaps your only experience might be watching werewolf movies, or as a child reading a Little Red Riding Hood book, or watching Beauty and the Beast. Who knows? I don't know. These are generalizations, of course, as opposed to actually seeing actual wolves in their natural habitat. So, what sorts of associations do you start to build given these types of contextualizations and these types of experiences? So one more concept that I want to cover is the difference between the dominant position, the oppositional position, and the negotiated position. So the dominant position, and I believe this was covered in 102. Certainly if you took 102 with me, we would have discussed this. It was part of the text in the textbook, but I'm not sure if all of you have looked at this concept before. The dominant position is what we have when an audience agrees with the text's cultural biases. So this would be when there's, a text of some sort that is meant to be interpreted a certain way that might reflect the dominant discourse of the era. And so the audience kind of goes along with it or agrees with it because they're assuming that this is accurate because it reflects their own cultural biases. The oppositional position would be when a portion of the audience rejects the text's cultural biases. A negotiated position might be when the audience accepts some of the text's cultural biases but rejects others. So let's look at a headline and see how that might play out. This is a recent one. Elon Musk to offer $100 million prize for best carbon capture tech. Okay, I'm not sure what the dominant discourse would be surrounding this. Probably that this would be great and that Elon Musk has done a lot for environmental issues, and that, if we can solve climate change through technology, that would be fantastic. And that maybe I don't know, but maybe billionaires spending a lot of money on this is the way we can solve this. So that might be the dominant view with something like this headline. So then what might be a negotiated or an oppositional position? Let's see. So an oppositional position might be something like we are never going to find a solution to climate change if we are married to this idea of being able to buy ourselves out of this situation. That's ridiculous. And Elon Musk is giving us false hope, and we should not be paying attention to the help of billionaires because that's not what we need to be thinking about right now. A negotiated position might be, well, that's great that Elon Musk is doing that. I'm glad to hear that. And it's good that we're exploring carbon capture options, but obviously we need to approach climate change through a multiplicity of many solutions, or we're not going to be able to solve this. We can't think about it as a technology problem, but it's still a good thing that we're doing these things because every little bit helps. Maybe that might be a more negotiated position. So be thinking about how you interpret headlines, how you interpret sustainability stories. How much do you take for granted? And are you being overly oppositional as well? Sometimes we can go too far the other way. We can, on the one hand, maybe we're not questioning things enough, and on the other hand, we can just decide that we're going to reject everything that is in any way reflects the dominant discourse.